The Atlanta Braves have moved Grant Holmes out of the rotation. Is this the right move? Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today, a production of the Belief Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can find all my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. Ton of stuff I want to get to today. There's the Phillies are surging. They've been really good recently, and we may have written them off too soon. I think we're okay on the Mets, but maybe not the Phillies. We'll talk about that in a minute. Atlanta's rotation for this weekend in LA, and Grant Holmes leaving the rotation and becoming back to that utility pitcher role. But before we do that, it is important to discuss for a minute and maybe properly appreciate the loss of Ted Turner. He passed away on Wednesday at the age of 87, and it's amazing to sit back and look at the impact he had in so many different areas. Obviously, as Braves fans, the number one thing we think about is, he owned the Atlanta Braves and founded TBS, was the original, was the pioneer of the concept of a nationwide superstation and built Atlanta's fan base into what it is today. That Rockies series, Seattle series, so many people in the ballpark were Braves fans. Like in Colorado, it felt like there were more Braves fans there than Rockies fans. And that's part of the legacy of Ted Turner. And a lot of the remembrances of Ted Turner have focused, obviously, on the Braves. That's what we are here for. This is a Atlanta Braves podcast. But I do want to also acknowledge some of the other things, just how wide of an impact that he had. If you like staying informed, he founded CNN, the first 24-hour cable news channel. A lot of people can't imagine what it would be like to not have cable news 24/7. It didn't exist before Ted Turner. He created it by the founding of CNN. If you're a wrestling fan, WCW. He didn't create the concept of wrestling, clearly, but he helped with the revival of professional wrestling by purchasing Jim Crockett Promotions and then rebranding that and growing that as WCW, World Championship Wrestling. He launched the Goodwill Games, which was kind of an alternative to the Olympics back in 1980, 1984, when the Olympics didn't have everybody involved, right? When the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979, the United States and a lot of Western countries boycotted the 1980 Summer Olympics in Moscow. And then so the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc boycotted the 1984 Summer Olympics. So Ted Turner created the Goodwill Games. And the idea here was bringing the athletes together in a sort of nonpartisan manner to celebrate sport. It's just one of a ton of surprising things that maybe, that came from Ted Turner. If you're the generation that I am, I was born in the mid-'80s, so obviously I grew up on the Braves and I grew up on watching them on TBS and all of that. Dale Murphy was my favorite player growing up. I wore number 3 as a kid in youth baseball because of Dale Murphy. But I also grew up watching the animated series Captain Planet. That was created by Ted Turner. Captain Planet and the Planeteers was a cartoon that was created by Ted Turner. Fun fact, one of the villains in Captain Planet was named Duke Nukem. Then there was a video game. I don't necessarily, I don't think they're trying to, have the character of Duke Nukem in the game be the Duke Nukem from Captain Planet, but like the kind of impact that Ted Turner had on so many things. Up until I think 2011 or 2010, he was the largest private landowner in the United States. And a lot of his land had ranches on it to preserve the bison population and then to repopularize bison meat. And if you ever went to Ted's Montana Grill, they served a lot of bison that came from Ted Turner's ranches. Ted's Montana Grill, Ted Turner's Montana Grill. The impact that Ted Turner had in everything. Sailing. He was a big enthusiast of sailing, the America's Cup. And, the United States was able to, he's in the National Sailing Hall of Fame for winning the America's Cup and being so involved in sailing. If you're a movie enthusiast, guess what? Turner Classic Movies. That channel, obviously Turner, his broadcasting system, but it was his idea personally, from what I've been told. The United Nations Foundation, he gave $1 billion to the United Nations Foundation. He founded the Nuclear Threat Initiative that is dedicated on reducing global reliance on and preventing the proliferation of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. He did so many things to try and make the world a better place. And obviously, we all love him for the baseball stuff, for the Atlanta Braves stuff. But I think it's important to point out how much of a positive impact Ted Turner had on the world. Was he perfect? No. He's indirectly responsible. This is a funny story. The National Film Registry with the Library of Congress, where they select culturally significant films to preserve in their original formats. That was created because of Ted Turner. Because he purchased the MGM Film Studio in 1986 and ended up selling part of it off, but he kept the film library. And so to have content for his networks, as well as to make some money off the purchase, he took out a lot of debt to buy it. It was like $1 billion in 1986. So probably, I don't know what that converts to now, but 4 or 5 or whatever. Anyway, he syndicated some of MGM's back library, things that were made before 1986, to television stations across the country. But in some cases, they aired colorized versions. He had colorized versions made, and they were sent out for the syndication. And there were a lot of people in movies, film critics, actors, directors, who were very not happy about this. And partially due to that is why the Library of Congress created the National Film Registry. Again, not perfect, but you can argue there is not very many people in American history, modern American history, who have had such a massive impact on so many different facets of American life and areas than Ted Turner. And we're going to miss him. In just a minute, let's get to the original topic of the episode. Let's talk Grant Holmes. Let's talk the rotation. Let's talk the Phillies. We'll do all that next, right here on Braves Today. The Atlanta Braves have officially moved Grant Holmes from the rotation. And this is not going to be permanent. Walt Weiss did say that he will make some starts this year. This is not a permanent move to the bullpen. But Holmes is not a full-time starting pitcher anymore. And I understand this decision. So let's back up a little bit here. In his Atlanta Braves career, which is his entire time in the majors, Grant Holmes has 220 and 2/3 innings, of 3.92 for an ERA, which is good. Like that's solid. That's solid and good performance by Grant Holmes. He started off as a reliever, a long man, a swing man, moved to the rotation for 2025, and now he's moving back out. You can argue, and I think successfully here, that Grant Holmes was better as a utility pitcher than as a starter. So 2024, he appears in 26 games, 7 starts. He does get used as a swingman, 7 starts, but 26 games, 68 and a third innings, 1.2 WAR via Fangraphs, F-WAR. 2025, he moves to the rotation. He makes 1 relief appearance in like that first week of the season. He throws a single inning of relief, and then from then on, he starts the entire rest of the year. 115 innings, a better strikeout rate, 0.9 WAR. His ERA was close to a half run higher, 3.99 compared to 3.56. And the real issue, which I've talked about before, was his walk rate. As a reliever, Grant Holmes had a 22.4% strikeout rate and a 4.2% walk rate. He was very, very good at not giving out free passes. A whip of 109. When he moved into the rotation, in the time he's worked as a starter, his strikeout rate's actually gotten better. It's gone up from 22.5% to 24%, and some of that is his stuff just getting better, right? Season over season improvements and things like that. 24 to 25, 25 to 26. But his walk rate has jumped to 10.1%. And so, like, the obvious conversation here is the improved strikeout rate is not worth the worse walk rate. His whip as a starter is 1.32. And the big thing for me is the strikeout to walk ratio goes from 14.6% as a reliever. 18.2% as a reliever to 13.9%. And when you dive into how he does times through the order, you can kind of see how it's better maybe to keep him as that swingman, have him go 3-4 innings, and then go to the pen. So first time through, as a starter, opponents are hitting 196 off of Grant Holmes. It's a 569 OPS. 35 games, 315 plate appearances, 8 home runs, and 14 total extra base hits. 87 strikeouts, 26 walks. So it's like 3 and a third, my math real quick, 3.35 strikeouts per walk. The second time through the order, hitters gain 90 points of batting average. They go from 196 to 286. And they gain 288 points of OPS. And I think like 198 of that is, or 192 of that is slug. He's allowed 15 home runs in 35 games and 305 plate appearances the second time through. 26 extra base hits. He's walked more guys. He struck out significantly less. His strikeout to walk ratio goes from 3.35 to just barely over 2. And it's funny, he actually rebounds a little bit for that third time through. He has 30 games where he got into that third time through the order. He didn't finish it, though, and so he's in there with only 164 plate appearances. But he actually kind of gets a little bit better there and goes, it's like a 232 average and a 759 OPS. But his strikeout to walk ratio continues to collapse, and he's at like 161. So Grant Holmes performs the best when he can go through the order once versus twice. And I think some of that comes down to pitch usage. When you look at his arsenal, he has 6 pitches. He technically throws 6 pitches. But in reality, at least this year, because he was able to improve that terrible fastball that I wrote about in the offseason, shout out to Jeremy Hefner for reading Braves Today, he is mostly fastball slider to both-handedness, right? To lefties, it's like 41% fastball, four-seamer, 31% slider. He does mix that curveball in a little bit there, right, as the third pitch, 14% curveball. And then a little bit of cutters, a little bit of changeups, a little bit of sinkers. Against righties, it's 46% slider, 33% fastball, 13% sinker, and then he mixes in a little bit of the cutter and the curveball. He doesn't really throw the changeup right on right, which, okay, sure, makes sense. But it's clear that he doesn't really trust those secondary pitches. And so because of that, he's really, in essence, a 3-pitch pitcher to each handedness. And it's, again, mainly just the first two, just the fastball slider. And I think that's some of the issue you see with his second and third times through the order. Compare it to a guy like a Bryce Elder who has a smaller pitch mix than Holmes does. But you see, Elder, we talked about this recently, Elder has more trust in the changeup now. He added that cutter as a weapon against lefties. He has the ability to mix things up a little bit more time and time through the order because he trusts those extra pitches. Grant Holmes just isn't there. And so because of that, I do think, kind of getting back to the original point of this, the utility pitcher designation is better for him. It is more valuable to be able to take Grant Holmes and say, hey, we're going to let you come out of the pen, let it eat for 3 innings if we need to. In 24, when we did that, his chase rate, his whiff rates, his walk rates were some of the best in baseball. So because they do that, this weekend starters become Chris Sale on Friday, Spencer Strider on Saturday, Bryce Elder on Sunday. And so what I expect to happen here is Spencer Strider on Saturday is the guy you want to watch for in a do we need length behind him scenario. I think if you move Holmes to the pen and you are able to keep him stretched out where he can cover 3 innings, whatever it might be, that gives you, one, the flexibility to move Ronaldo López into a more of a leverage role. I don't want him pitching the 7th or the 8th until he can figure out what's going on with the mechanics and the velocity that he's lost. Like, I absolutely don't want to just go with that. I don't want to go with 8th inning Ronaldo López. But it does give you another guy that you can use in leverage situations. You know, you have to cover 4 innings here. Let's say somebody's a 5 and dive. If you don't want to need to go to Kenley, Lee, Suarez, Iglesias to knock out the last 4, you can let Raylo pitch 1 and then be able to bring him back on day 2 for another thing, because Grant Holmes can now be one of your length guys out of the pen. Didier Fuentes is the other. Keeping Martin Perez in the rotation, your rotation now would be Sale, going off of this order, Sale, Strider, Elder, Richie, Perez would be your 1 through 5. I'd argue based on results and performance so far that Elder's your number 2 behind Sale. But Strider's potential when he's not at elevation and when he's fully back from the injury, we may see it Saturday, who knows. He projects as the second best pitcher in that group as far as stuff is concerned. And we're going to talk more about that series, those 3 pitching matchups, what to expect from the Dodgers and all of that on tomorrow's show. Tomorrow's a Dodgers preview, because of who the Dodgers are, because of their last 2 championships, because of the money they spend in the roster and everything. That feels like a really important series. I don't know exactly how important it is, truth be told, but it feels really important. So we'll get to that a little bit tomorrow. We'll break that down tomorrow. But I like the idea of, hey, we have Holmes. We can use him in bulk behind Strider if we need to. We can use him as a single inning guy. But again, I want to keep him stretched out. It allows us to use Raylo as a single inning guy. And hopefully, if he's back in that single inning role, we can say, hey, you're not going to cover 2 or 3 innings here. You're going to get 1 inning. You can go back to that reliever mindset that you had when the White Sox moved you to the pen, and you can let it eat, and we can see what his stuff does. We can see, can he find some of that velocity again? Can he do all of that? What's going on here with Ronaldo López? Intrigued about all of that. In just a minute, let's talk about the Phillies, because they're coming, and I think we need to discuss it. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. This episode is brought to you by IQ Bar, our exclusive snack, hydration, and coffee sponsor. IQ Bar protein bars, IQ Mix hydration mixes, and IQ Joe mushroom coffees are the delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel you need to win your day. The Ultimate Sampler Pack's a great way to try all of their products and flavors. You get 9 IQ bars, 8 IQ Mix sticks, and 4 IQ Joe sticks. These are all clean label certified, entirely free from gluten, dairy, soy, GMOs, and artificial ingredients, with tons of flavor combinations to choose from. Mint chocolate chip protein bars, blueberry pomegranate hydration mixes, vanilla spice coffee, limited edition seasonal flavors. My wife had me try the matcha chai bar that was in the Ultimate Sampler Pack, and that is not a thing that I typically would elect to do. I like chai. I'll drink chai tea if I'm at a nice tea place that has it. But no, the matcha chai was surprisingly good. I liked it. So that's why the Ultimate Sampler Pack's so good. You try things you normally wouldn't try. Right now, IQ Bar is offering Braves Today listeners 20% off of all IQ Bar products, including that Ultimate Sampler Pack, plus free shipping. To get your 20% off, text MLB to 64000. That's MLB to 64000. That's MLB to 64000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details. The Philadelphia Phillies kind of had an opposite start than the Braves did to start the year, and it's because their schedule was a lot less favorable than ours was. Like, they started off with the Rangers and the Nationals, and we saw this against the Nationals. Nationals, surprisingly good offense. Rangers go 3-3 in that road trip. Or, sorry, in that homestand. 3-3 in that homestand. And then from there, they had to go out west to Colorado and San Francisco, which we went to, and we saw what Colorado looked like. They go 2-1 in Colorado. They go 1-2 in San Francisco. Not easy ballparks to play in. And then they got the Diamondbacks at home, and they won 2 out of 3. But then at that point, they went into a gauntlet. They hosted the Cubs for 3. They go 1-2. They hosted us. We swept them. Then they went to Chicago to take on the Cubs again. They got swept in a 4-game series, so that was funny. And then they came to Truist and lost 2 out of 3 to us. And then they had to face the Giants again. And I've talked about this ad nauseum now. I hate the scheduling. I hate how often you play teams. They played 26 games in the month of April. All but 7 of them were against the Giants, Cubs, and Braves. They played the Giants twice, 6 games total. They played the Cubs twice, 7 games total. They played the Braves twice, 6 games total. There's no reason to have these series compressed so close together. The Braves won't see the Phillies again until September. Both rosters are probably going to be completely different at that point. But gauntlet for them. Now, the Giants have kind of collapsed in the last couple weeks. So Philly swept that series. If I remember right, I think they walked off both games of that doubleheader on April 30th, which is just wild to do. They took on the Marlins in a wraparound series, won 3 out of 4. They took on the A's. They won the first 2 of that series. Today's the series finale. And so the Phillies right now are 8-2 in their last 10 games. And they've been able to, I'm going to say, I guess, kind of right some of the wrongs that were going on with their roster. From the position player perspective, terrible starts for the year for everybody, right? Adolis Garcia, Bryson Stott, Alec Boehm, all of those guys. Some of them still haven't recovered, but like in the last 15 days, Adolis Garcia is hitting 300. I think he has like only 2 home runs, but he's hitting 300. JT Realmuto has been back for 4 games. He's like 4 for 14 since he came back. Bryce Harper is hitting 283. Backup catcher Garrett Stubbs is hitting 267 in that stretch. Brandon Marsh is usually a 300 hitter. He's hitting 462 in the last 15 games for Philly. A lot of their poor offensive performances weren't going to maintain as bad as they were. They were going to pick it up. Harper's hit 4 home runs in the last 15 games. Stott has 3. Schwarber's only hitting 192, but he's never been a high batting average guy. He's always just a high on base and a high slug guy. So that's still kind of, he's the same. But they've just gotten better. A lot of the poor performances have normalized for them from an offensive perspective. From a pitching perspective, it's a similar story. A lot of their struggles that they had, guys that were just terrible from an ERA perspective, have been better. Jesus Luzardo has a 1.35 ERA in the last 2 weeks. He's made 2 starts with 2 total earned runs. Aaron Nola, 6 runs in 10 2/3, but he had 1 good outing and 1 bad outing in there. Like, reliever Jose Alvarado, 5 scoreless innings in the last 2 weeks. Orion Kerkering, 6 1/3 scoreless innings. Even some of their depth guys, Tim Meza, Chase Shugart, 5 and change innings scoreless since then. And like Zach Wheeler has made 3 starts in the last 15 days and an ERA of 3.12. So getting Wheeler back has helped. And I never personally kind of wrote off the Phillies. We laughed at their misfortune, yes, because we're going to do that, because that's just fun to do. I have written off the Mets. Like, they'll probably recover a little bit, but I've written the Mets off because they're the Mets. LOL Mets. They're either 29th or 30th in runs scored. Like, their offense is terrible. Their rotation ERA is only middling, and they just look like a mess. They have 0 clubhouse chemistry. Apparently, their 2 best players in Lindor and Soto dislike each other so much that they'll be hurt just to not be on the roster at the same time. It's wild. But Philly's coming. And I think we need to be aware that this division is not yet done. What helps them is they're still in this little tough stretch right now. After they finish the A's today, which again, if they win today, they sweep the series. They host the Rockies for 3 at home. Then they go on the road, but it's to Boston. And Boston's been a mess. You talk about a bad clubhouse. Boston's got a bad clubhouse. We've seen the veterans and the young players sniping at each other in the media. It's a bad clubhouse up there. The vibes are not great in Boston. But they'll head to Boston. And then after that, it gets a little bit tougher. They've got the Pirates. Wild to think that like the Pirates are a little bit of a tougher road, but the pitching, the offense has been better. Then they get the Reds, then the Guardians, and then Padres and Dodgers. So like they've gained a lot of ground here as far as the win-loss record. They're now 17-20. If they win tonight, they'll be 18-20. So 2 games below 500. They're still 8.5 games back of Atlanta right now. They're tied with Washington. But the point is, they've gained a lot of ground rather quickly. Now, not on us. We went 7-3 in that same stretch. They went 8-2. They didn't gain a lot of ground on us, but they gained a lot of ground in the wild card. They gained ground in the win-loss record. They're 3 games out of a wild card spot right now, which is obviously more than enough to overcome, honestly, by June, assuming they can get through that back half of the month tough stretch of Guardians, Padres, Dodgers intact. By the way, when they get into June, they go back to the Padres again. But then it gets another easy stretch. They get the White Sox. They get a struggling and injured Blue Jays team. They get a struggling and injured Brewers team. They get the Marlins again. They get the Mets again, twice in the month. Like, the schedule is favorable for them to gain some more ground. And so I think the big thing to keep in mind here is that Atlanta, yes, we have a healthy lead. We have by far the biggest division lead in baseball. The next largest division lead is 3.5 games, is what the Cubs have over the Cardinals. Every other division has somebody that's close. The Padres are half a game behind the Dodgers. The Rays are half a game behind the Yankees. The Tigers are 1 game behind the Guardians. The Mariners and Rangers are 1 game behind the division-leading Athletics. They're only 18-18, though. The A's are at 500, and they're leading the division right now. The AOS is awful. But the point I'm making is we got to watch out for Philly. That's not done. The one thing that I will give the Braves here over the Phillies is, well, I guess there's 2 things, really. One is you have the lead. The pressure's on them to catch up to you. You have the lead right now. Possession's 9/10 of the law. You have the lead. I don't actually know if that's true. I've always heard people say that. If you're a law enforcement expert, you're listening to this pod, let me know if that's true or not. But I will say Atlanta's injury returns have the potential to be a lot more impactful than Phillies, because they've already gotten the big one. They've already gotten Zach Wheeler back. And outside of him, there's nobody else on the injured list for them that projects to be a difference maker. Lefty Kyle Backus in the bullpen? Okay, sure. Zach Pop, he's not doing anything significant. Johan Rojas is suspended for PEDs, 80 games. He's a rotational depth defensive outfielder. A lot of their position player prospects, their top ones are hurt. Aiden Miller, their top prospect and likely successor at third base, he's hurt right now in the minors. Barring trades, they don't have a lot of reinforcements coming. They also don't have a lot of rotation depth in AAA. The major league roster is pretty much most of what they have. And it's really good, don't get me wrong. Sanchez, Wheeler, Luzardo, Painter, and Nola. If Nola's your number 5, you can do worse. But their rotation depth in AAA Lehigh Valley, it's not great. Moises Chase is injured. And so it's like Alan Rangel, old friends Bryce Wilson and Tucker Davidson, and Connor Gillespie. That's their rotation depth. Meanwhile, the Braves do legitimately project to get better. You're hoping to get Ronald Acuna back soon. It's about time for an update on Ronald. I imagine on Friday, we'll probably hear something from the Braves, from Walt Weiss, about how Ronald is doing. But the Braves have, obviously you have Ronald. Ha-Seong Kim is due back in the next 2 weeks, which gives you more outfield flexibility with Mauricio Dubon, because the assumption here is you're going to plug Ha-Seong Kim into shortstop every day, which means that you can... Kyle Farmer's probably gone at that point, but that means that you have more flexibility to use Dubon in the outfield and all that kind of stuff. And then pitching-wise, Hurston Waldrop is the first guy that's due back. If I remember correctly, Spencer Schwellenbach is due to talk to the doctor any day now. And if the doctor gives him the all clear, he'll start a throwing program. So Waldrop's still roughly on track for June. I've been told he's in Florida throwing at the complex. He's on track for sometime in June. Schwellenbach's hopefully going to start throwing soon, which you could maybe then project out something like August, hopefully. AJ Smith-Shawver is already throwing after his Tommy John, but that's a longer return. I would imagine he went down in June of last year. June 9th was his surgery, if I remember right when I talked to his parents. So I would assume you're probably looking, I think he had the brace. You're probably looking at August, September. He only has, side note here, he only has one option left. So what I'm thinking needs to happen is if they can wait to call him up until September, let him have an extra spot in the bullpen if he's not fully stretched out as a starter, so that you can keep him in the majors all year, not use that final option, and then you can turn around and you can have an option year with him next year. So that way, if he's not ready workload-wise, there's different things you can do here, right? So that's kind of my thought process here when it comes to A.J. Smith-Shawver. But you could add Waldrop, you could add Schoenbach, you could maybe add Smith-Shawver throughout the course of the year. The Braves are in first place. The Phillies are not. The Phillies have gotten all their impactful guys back from injury. The Braves have more coming on the way. So you can see where it's favorable for Atlanta, but you've also got to make it work. You've still got to do your job. And that starts tomorrow in LA. We'll preview the series tomorrow. Stay tuned. We've got more newsletters coming from BravesToday.com. There was one this morning about the upcoming trade deadline and what the Braves can be looking for or likely will be looking for, and if they can get something done earlier than that. There's one coming this afternoon about the draft from Taylor. More good stuff from him. But in the meantime, please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you next time on Braves Today.